So we're here with Marshall Cavan, right? Craven topped for this Golden Phoenix event with what? Can you tell us what you topped with today?
I went in with Overlord. Chaos is getting new support, especially this weekend. So I wanted to go with a deck that was very Vanguard reliant. It didn't need its board to be able to do many plays, to be able to threaten lethal. And I felt it was a really better matchup going in, especially because the Legion turn is just so scary that it can just put a lot of pressure, especially and also with the standard support, it can apply a lot of pressure early. You don't really have to worry about grade 2 gaming because you can just ride up and you don't really care. I thought it would be a really good choice, especially because Chaos was going to be so heavy here.
You said Legion, right?
The Legion, yes.
Okay, all right, let's see this.
All right, first out, we got the starter. We actually run two separate starters. We run the Lizard Soldier Conroe from V Series and the old Lizard Soldier Conroe. So these can be pretty much interchangeable depending on like what match you decide. Like if you know what decks, like what they're about, like if you know they can't retire early, then you can use the Conroe to go fetch your pieces that you would need, like a Lizard General or a Heal Trigger or whatever you would need. So they're pretty much interchangeable. Like game 1, there was games where I would ride to get the quick shield, and then game 2 I would use the old Conroe to be able to call it back to go fetch for like something that would let me push a little harder if I knew they were going to give me early damage. So it made a difference in a couple of games, so it was pretty good. On to grade 1s, we have 2 Heat Shot Dragon. Essentially what he is you throw him behind your Vanguard, and every time your Vanguard stands, he will restand as well. So he's a perpetual 8k booster. He will swing with him every time. If you ride him first and you're going second and you get a quick shield, you can also ditch the quick shield to draw an extra card. So he's there to hit a little bit better numbers, especially like on your first grade 3 turn. Next we have 4 Lizard General Conroes. What can I say, man? You play him, you reveal an Overlord, you can go find any Overlord you want. You just have to discard a card after you find it, and then he's pre-GB. You can retire himself to give your Vanguard the skill to countercharge 2 when it swings. This card made or break some of my games this weekend. We have 1 Lava Flow. Lava Flow's there because he's just a good ride, and he's also a 13k booster for the early game. Especially if you know you need to rush, you can call him because most people won't try to call that many rear guards. So if you can always call more rear guards, he gains a 5k. So he swings for 13, boosts for 13. He's just really good in that department. And also riding him to search for the Overlord in case you don't have one is pretty good, because then you can add it and then use the Lizard General to go fetch whichever one you want. Next, we have 4 copies of Calamity Tower Wyvern. He's there mainly for the high roll, because the high roll in this deck, especially because what our grade 3 lineup is looking like, it allows for big pushes very early. Next, we have 2 copies of Lizard Soldier Belloc. So people ask me why I'm running Belloc. The reason I'm running Belloc is because he functions as 2 extra Denial Griffins. Because if I'm GB, I can guard with him, no pass something, and then kill it if it's rested. It came up a couple of times this weekend, especially against one of my matches against Great Nature. He called a Rhino and he gave it a lot of power. I managed to guard it with the Belloc, but I didn't have a heal trigger. And it retired him and it killed his turn immediately. He wasn't able to do anything else after that. Next, we have grade 2s. 4 copies of Igni Road Dragon. He's a really good ride because he has the potential to just +1 by adding a copy of the Cross to your hand. And he can fetch either one. It just says Dragonic Overlord the Cross. And also he's a great rear guard for every time your Vanguard swings. If you have 4 or less cards in hand, he gets +5k every time. So on cross turns where you're going to swing 3 times, he's going to get +15. So he becomes a 25k beater, and it's pretty darn good. Next, we run 4 copies of Burnrise Dragon. Burnrise Dragon is there because this deck has a lot of countercharge, and every single time you swing, he can gain 15k. Every time you stand, he gains 15k in a crit, which can be lethal to just opponents who just can't guard it because they're so focused on guarding your Overlord that they're not really focusing on the card that's just slowly gaining power and crit. And like I said, with the countercharge you have from Lizard General, it helps a whole lot. Wyvern Strike Decot. So essentially what he does is if you're on the end or you're on the cross and you have the end's name, you can counterblast 1, shove him to soul, and he gets Battle Door for the turn. giving Battle Door is just so threatening, especially when you ride up and your opponent is on grade 2. Because if they have PGs, it rips another card. It makes your opponent, like, it applies a lot of pressure. And it also gives the soul to be able to use other abilities. Grade 3s, 1 copy of the V Series Dragonic Overlord the Cross. I'm only running 1 because I can fetch him with Lizard General. I can find him with Lava Flow, and he's there for if I go first, and if my opponent decides to stay on grade 2, I can ride up and not really care because he just applies so much pressure with the 3 swings from the end. Next is 3 copies of the old Dragonic Overlord the Cross. He is the Legion. He legions with the end, and this turn is just really dangerous for the opponent because it applies so much pressure. Because when you legion and you swing, you can activate the end skill, and when you restand the end, not the X, so you do not lose drive checks. So you will continuously have twin drive every single swing, but you also gain all the abilities of having the end, like the Battle Door or the Power or anything else. Next, we have 4 copies of the end. This is the boy that makes the deck work. He's simple, easy ability. He's going to restand and swing 3 times. That's all he's here for. He's here for the Legion. He's here for the X. He's here to make all these swings possible. He's really threatening, especially because he gives a 10k power buff. It can turn really bad really quickly. For triggers, we are running 12 crit and 4 heals, all being 10ks. You mainly want to run 12 crit because when you go into your Legion turn, you have a very strict hand limit, and if you don't want to hit a misdraw to make it where you can't hit another restand, and crits will always apply pressure, especially if your opponent knows that you have a ton of crits in your deck. It will just be able to it'll sort of psych them out a little bit because they're like, oh god, if he hits a crit, it's going to be bad. On to the G Zone. We're going to start with G Guardians. We have 2 copies of Absalom. A lot of times he comes into play when your opponent just can't build a board and they have a very big Vanguard, like against decks like Dimension Police and stuff like that, who swing very big but they don't really have a rear guard pressure. You'll be able to have a giant shield for next to nothing. I even use it against I try to use it against like Bermuda when they use Tirawa to bounce their board back. They get +5, but you get +10, so it sort of counteracts it a little bit. And I like running 2 because having just 1 has killed me on several occasions. We run 1 copy of Advanced Guard. Advanced Guard's here because a lot of times people will call like problematic grade 0s or grade 1s to the back row. You don't want to have them there, and it can really mess up combos, especially like against decks that rely on having a trigger. Like I know Spike Brothers will use their stand triggers. I know like Bermuda will use stand triggers and crits. They'll just have them in the back row, and you don't want them there. I've also used this against Shadow Paladins when they've only had 1 grade 1 in the board, and they can't activate Dagger because of it, because he's gone. 1 Racktome. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really go into Racktome. I didn't really use Racktome at all. He was there pretty much to give you a filter. He's there to ditch and draw, which a lot of times you can ditch, like if you know you're gonna live, you can ditch Sentinel for that way you have Sentinels and drop for one of the later strides. And then for the best G Guard and Kagero, 3 copies of Denial Griffin. Denial Griffin, he's here. He shuts down a rear guard. Any rear guard centric decks, if it doesn't have resist, he'll just end the turn immediately for the most part. So what he does is when an attack is happening, you counterblast 1 and retire the attacking rear guard. It can be just so debilitating because it can end a lot of combo plays because most of the time they'll restand their rear guards and use their other abilities. 1 copy of Defeat Flare. Defeat Flare's here mainly because there are some decks that their boosters give their skills. They don't really care about their Vanguard that much, or the front row and the Vanguard. So it's mainly their boosters are the ones that have the skills. So when they swing the Vanguard, if you have 2 Flame Dragons, you can activate the ability, and he just retires the entire back row. It makes it a lot easier to be able to just survive because they don't get those abilities anymore. And also, he can set up for Absalom as well. If you have 2, he can free up 3 open circles to then give Absalom a plus 30k shield. Onto the strides. We have 2 copies of Zenbus Dragon. Zenbus Dragon is a really good stride because he costs no counterblast, he costs no soul blast. He's just flip a card, blow up the board, plus 10k to all grade 3 or greater rear guards. He can kill resist units because he doesn't target. He's mainly here for like Tachikaze, who runs Sweeper Kanto. I can kill the sweepers, I don't really care. Any Victor who runs a lot of resist units, I can just clear the board and not care. And a lot of times, I've had to use him just to apply pressure when I couldn't do anything else. And he's also great for if your opponent's damaged or not. 2 copies of Ziegenberg. He's one of the best restanders Kagero has ever gotten. As far as I'm concerned, he's pretty much a mainstay of Kagero at this point. He's on act, Soul Blast 1, flip a card, he blows up a rear guard. Then if you're blazing at the end of battle that he swings, you Counterblast 1, discard a card for every rear guard your opponent has, restand him, and he gets drive -2. So he's essentially just a really good and almost free restander, which is pretty plus. Then we have 2 copies of Dumjit Valor. Dumjit Valor is majority of the time the first stride or the only stride I go into. He's very good, especially if you've had to guard early and use your sentinels. He gains an extra power buff. And also, if you know your opponent has driven, like they've revealed PGs or G guards, you can go into him and threaten them with a restand, which most of the time they just won't guard it because of that. And like I say, he just gets very big, and on place he pops a rear guard, which is pretty good. As you've noticed, this deck does not run a lot of retire, other than the strides. Last stride we have 2 copies of the Ace. I didn't really use him, but he's here for if you have the available damage and you need to hit a restander, but you can't fulfill the requirements for the cross, or you have to discard a lot of cards to be able to get to the cross legion. He's here to run him, and he's just a restander. He counterblast 2, flip a card, and he will get drive -2, and then he will restand. Like I said, I never really went into him today, but I've play tested with him, and he's pretty good.
All right. Anything you have to say about the event, or any shout outs you want to give?
The event was amazing. I've been here to every single one that they've actually hosted down here, and every single time it's been just fantastic. All the judges are nice, the people are nice. It's always fun to come and see friends. I want to give a shout out to Jonathan Owens. He helped me play test around with it a little bit. I want to give a shout out to Crow from TripleSleeveTCG. He's the one who told me to play this deck the very last minute, so because I've been on the fence all weekend about playing it. And I just want to give a shout out to all the people up in Jacksonville, Florida, who's helped me sort of play test with this deck. It's been we've had a lot of grind games, and it's been a lot of fun. And then everybody down here in Orlando who's been with me, and to all the people at Triple Sleeve, y'all are awesome.
All right, thank you, man.